The intention of this tutorial is to give a little extended information to help you better prepare for the timed writing prompt on the final. So what you notice is the directions that you have as part of your final exam preparation, which talk about the timed essay. Just a reminder, to prepare and to have everything you need for that day, you need to collect 8 pieces of evidence that fulfill the categories listed below. That those evidence you can label into a specific category, but you're not allowed to have any other part of the writing prompt done because you're doing a writing on demand. The driving question for what you're going to do is what factors contributed to the development of civilization of Western Europe up through the Middle Ages. The day of the final, you will have 45 minutes to develop as many spec sets as you can to address the question looking at the categories below. Just a reminder, all of the evidence that you find must come from resources that we've completed in class as part of your learning. 2-column notes, worksheets, websites, look at classrooms. Sometimes I had you read articles online, watch videos. All of that information is open for you to use, but make sure it's something that we actually did in class as practice. We've done a lot of work to prep for the final question, so it's really important that you reflect on that learning. There's no new introduction to any information, so please do not use Google for research. So this page gives you the directions that you need, but I'm going to scroll down and actually extend this learning by talking to you a little more in depth about what you need to do. All right, so the first thing is, this is the question that's driving everything that you find evidence for. What factors contributed to the development of civilization of Western Europe up through the Middle Ages? Now, your thesis statement will depend on the types of evidence that you collect. But you're going to notice as I develop my thesis below, which I've given an example of, you're going to notice that I've added categories to reflect where my specs may fall. Now, I know down below is the list of the evidence. I know that the evidence is going to fall in categories of political because I'm asking you to find political. I know it's going to fall in categories of social and cultural or cultural, depending. Military, there is a military facet under Rome, so we know you're going to have to cover that. You may have some extra categories though, especially when you look at your Roman one where I say topic of your choice. You may have mathematical, scientific, architectural, you decide. And then down below for Middle Ages, it's social or military, or it could actually be nope, social or military should cover what you need. Okay. So, why does that matter? Why do we categorize your evidence? Because when you create your thesis statement, you're going to actually specify the main categories that you're going to focus on. Instead of writing a full proof paragraph, though, you're going to write one solid thesis statement. So, if I were writing my essay, I would say there were many political, social, cultural, religious, military, and any other categories that I have factors that contribute to the development of Western Europe up through the Middle Ages. So you're going to notice that most of the words come from the question. What I've added is what's in different colors, which are the categories that my evidence will focus on. One of the things that I would suggest you do as you collect evidence is immediately categorize it and think about putting it in a color or classification. Because when you go to write your essay, you want to make sure that you don't forget a category and that your analysis clearly answers one of these categories. So if I say political, I better have analysis statements for some of my evidence that explain how those pieces of evidence were factors that helped to develop Europe politically. Okay. All right. So I wanted to give you an example of what one might look like. So what I did was I looked at my first category, which was political, direct democracy. And to prepare myself, I would actually highlight the evidence that I want to use and I would actually classify it. So I put evidence found from 2-column notes, page 118, and I classify it as political. And then I would think about setting up my specs. And you're allowed to do this ahead of time. So it says, as stated, under Cleisthenes, Athenian democracy grew. All citizens could belong to the assembly, in which they were considered equal before the law, and guaranteeing freedom of speech. In addition, a council of 500, whose membership was open to any citizens, carried out daily government. You're going to notice that 1, I embed the quote, and 2, I've cited it, and that evidence is now ready for my writing piece. Now, one of the strategies and suggestions that I said for writing on demand was to actually practice how to write with this evidence before you come to the final. You can't use it on the final, but it will better prepare you for taking away some of the anxiety that comes with testing. So what I did was, you're going to notice I created a mini outline below for practice. The only thing that you're allowed to bring is what I've highlighted in green, but in order to practice, I would actually set up an outline for myself and actually write it. So I said as my supporting detail to lead in, Cleisthenes helped to reform Athens by introducing sets of laws that established democracy for the Athenian people. So I have a little bit of background into who Cleisthenes is, and I could also look at my note sheet that I'm using and say, is there any information that could help me form my supporting details statement? Remember, the supporting details job is to give any necessary little bit of historical background and to lead me into the specs. So I'm telling the reader I'm going to be talking to you about democracy, and my specs clarifies what laws he passed to set up democracy in Athens. Then the most important piece of what I need to do is I need to clarify how this supports political, because I decided that this was a political factor that helped. So I said, through the development of direct democracy in Athens, many of you still struggle with this, so make sure you address the specs you just talked about. In Athens, Cleisthenes' actions was a political factor. Notice I specify the thesis there that developed Western Europe by establishing a new governmental system where citizens had a say, which broke from the traditional systems of the wealthy controlling everything in a nation. His actions would inspire later other civilizations in Europe, like the Romans. Okay, this is where we're going to broaden our scope. The past, you've been really analyzing just the civilization. Now you need to think about how does it transcend beyond the era and help into the development of Western Europe. That second sentence that I've highlighted, that's such an important sentence because when you get into your Roman section, you can actually draw connections with how direct democracy influenced the development of the Roman Republic. Now, what's going to collapse is when Rome collapses, that whole system of government's going to change and have to shift, and they're going to have to deal with the chaos, so they come up with feudalism. So just be mindful that you really think about how is this a political factor? Political means government. So how would this be something that would help in the development of civilization? And from the perspective of the Athenians, it was the first time that voices were being given to the citizens that were not wealthy. Okay? All right. So you're going to notice, once again, what's highlighted in green is the only thing you can have for the day of the final. The rest of it you're going to write on the spot. But everything I put below is a practice, and feel free to use my first one to help. You can use my first one as your specs. Make sure to give me credit, though, especially if you use my analysis statement. But I would practice by actually setting up mini outlines for each of my pieces of evidence and making sure that I specify a category in my analysis, and that category should match what I stated in my thesis. So I highlighted mine in green to remind my brain that I like color coordination. So my political, I've covered my political. Now, I'm going to cover political more than once because I'm required to. You have political for Rome, you have political for the Middle Ages. But those three pieces of evidence I need to make sure that I address. And when you set up your prompt, you should go in chronological order. So it should go Greeks to Romans to Middle Ages. All right. I hope that helps you understand a little bit of what you're doing. If you have any further questions or need further clarification, don't hesitate to email me. And like I said, the sooner you start collecting evidence, the better you're going to feel prepared for this part of the test. Good luck.